So all you folks out there in the lobby, if y'all would come on in. They can hear me. All right, as you know, because of the email that was sent out on Thursday or Friday, I lost track of about when that was, there's no parking across the street at the surgery center today because they're having their yards worked on. Last time that happened to us, we had people parking in the front yard. So, if you're willing and able, between church and between class and church, and you are parked on the hard surface, and you feel comfortable doing it, please move to the grass behind over here. There's several of us, 2 or 3 are already on there. Make sure you leave plenty of room for everybody, but we're going to run out of parking places otherwise. All right? And if you could possibly park on the grass on this other side as well, but if you're on the hard surface now and you're able to, between service and class, please go move to the grass so we can let visitors and folks who are coming in later have the good parking places. All right, but that's only if you feel comfortable walking in the grass and that sort of thing, okay? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We will continue our study on Nehemiah this morning, and most of our lesson is going to come from 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles this morning, because I wanted to kind of set the stage as to really what's happening in chapter 1 before we get into the journey of Nehemiah and really what he's famous for. And so, like I said, we'll do a lot from 2 Kings this morning, and we'll go on to 2 Chronicles as well. Now, I want to ask a question, though, to kind of get an idea. This is not to test your Bible knowledge or anything like that. It's just kind of to set the scene, if you will. How many of, and this is an assumption of mine, when you think about the kings of Israel, kings of Israel. We did Matthew did a study on the judges, a couple of months ago, or actually before the start of the year, because we've been reading through those 90 days. So, just for those that know, who was the first king of Israel? Saul. Okay. Who's the next one? David. Next one? Solomon. Okay, let's kind of stop there. Now, we'll divide after that. Most of y'all have seen the maps and all this and all that. You have the northern kingdom of Israel, and that will be controlled by Jeroboam. The southern kingdom will stay loyal to the son of Solomon, which is Rehoboam, and that would be the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Again, almost all of y'all know that. So, before my next question would be, just by a show of hands, is there anyone in here that can name all the kings of Judah? Okay, I have to ask that in order to, because if there are several that can do that, then this next question is just like, can anyone name any, but you got the first 3, Saul, David, Solomon. Can anybody name any of the other kings near the end of the reign of kings? Anybody have any names that you know was a king? You may not know if it was Israel or Judah, but you know the name. Anybody have any other kings of Israel or Judah? Ahab. He was north. He was Israel. So yeah, he's a northern kingdom. Oh, where he is. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that was. I've got a chart next, and it'll help a little bit in that. Any other kings? Josiah, Hezekiah, one of the famous ones. Yeah. Ahab, Hezekiah, Josiah. Any others? Okay. when we get into 2 Kings, I'll go ahead and tell you, near the end of Judah, there's going to be a lot of kings really quickly. And they're not going to have the life story like we have with David and even Solomon to that degree. It kind of speeds up after that. So we're going to look at, if you want to turn as far as where we're going to be at in the scripture today, we'll be starting at 2 Kings chapter 23. I've got a few slides that I want to share with you. I know they may be somewhat difficult to see, but this slide here was really revealing to me in trying to figure out how to kind of study this and what all we needed to look at. And if you look here, Nehemiah is not on this chart. Okay, Nehemiah is not on this chart. But what you'll find, what I found very interesting in this chart is that almost everybody else is. All the other Bible books that you memorize in the Old Testament, their names are probably up here. Anywhere from, we've got Isaiah, Micah, this is over here. See, I thought that red dot disappeared when you got to the TV. Red dot, no red dot, yeah. Clickers didn't advance when technology advanced. See, if you have a projector, this red dot's all over the place. But when they switch to TVs, it doesn't work. I think that's why some of them are green. I think green might work on TVs, I'm not sure. But anyway, if you look, if you, and I could share this slide, or I've got copies of it as well. But the kings of Israel, like some of you mentioned Hezekiah. Hezekiah is like right in the middle, like right across from the top red line, going across is Hezekiah. Now, this is divided between Israel and Judah. On the right hand side, that's Israel. And as you notice, that red line says Israel into Assyrian captivity. So that red line is where the Israel, that's when their kingdom ends. And as you can see, Judah will continue on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more kings before you get to the red line that talks about the Babylonian captivity. And in that, you'll see a lot of prophets. You'll see Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Jeremiah. You'll see on the other side, you'll see Daniel, you'll see Ezekiel. On up from there, you've got Micah, you've got Hosea, you've got Amos, you've got Isaiah. All of those prophets, again, that come because our Bibles are put together by subject matter, so to speak. I shouldn't say subject matter. You know, by prophets. You know, you got that big list of prophets from Isaiah to Zephaniah. You know, all of that actually is during 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, and so on. Nehemiah, actually, as we talked about last week, it comes at the end. It's kind of the end of the biblical history that we have of the nation of Israel, or Judah. I'll use those kind of interchangeably. So I wanted to today to kind of get us from Kings to Nehemiah in just a short amount of time. We're talking a span of a few decades when all of this is taking place. And again, Israel will be defeated. I'm having trouble since I'm going to be doing Nehemiah on Wednesday nights next quarter. Since I'm doing Isaiah next quarter on Wednesday nights. Some of this stuff that we talk about today, Isaiah is going to prophesy about hundreds of years before it happens. And so it's kind of an interesting twist to look at it in this way, to look at the events and then go back and see the prophecy of how these events are actually going to take place. And so very, very interesting when you look at it in this order. But let us look at 2 Kings this morning. 2 Kings, chapter 23, starting with verse 25. 2 Kings, let me get over there. 2 Kings 23 and verse 25. it will say, "Now before him there was no king like him, who turned to the Lord with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, nor after him did any arise like him." Now that's talking about Josiah. All right? King Josiah, most of you know, he was the 8-year-old, but he's the one, if you remember, it's so crazy how it all came about. I mean, they're basically remodeling the temple, and they find the book of the law. I mean, it's just like, how do you lose something like that? You know? But it was. And Josiah was just, I mean, he was grieved that the nation was doing so wrong. And so you have Josiah. Now, Josiah, in this list, he is the great-grandson of Hezekiah. He's the great-grandson of Hezekiah. So that's kind of where the order we are. All right? So, we have, let's start with Josiah. Now, in 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 30, we read of another king. Anyone want to read verse 30? 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 30. If you're over there, I hear some pages rattling. Anyone want to read that?
Josiah's servants brought his body in a chariot from Megiddo to Jerusalem and buried him in his own tomb. And the people of the land took Joahaz, son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in place of his father.
All right, so here's the next king. Again, Josiah, that's basically what we know is the book of the law. We don't know a lot of specifics about Josiah necessarily, but now we have that his son, Jehoahaz, is now the king. Now, let us go to, As we go through this, you're going to read about Eliakim. I'm going to go through verse 31. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord according to all his fathers had done. Now Pharaoh Necho, it's not Nico, the guy that nobody likes here in Tennessee anymore. That's Necho. I don't even know much about the story, but it's just like, you know, you're scrolling through Facebook, it's like, well, we bleed orange if Nico. So, you know, anyway. So Pharaoh, and of course when you see Pharaoh, you think of Egypt. That's basically what they call themselves. So he put him in prison at Riblah in the land of Hamath, and that he might not reign in Jerusalem, and he imposed on the land a tribute of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Then Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king in place of his father Josiah, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. And Pharaoh took Jehoahaz and went to Egypt, and he died there. So what's happening is there's an advancement in the Assyrian Empire. And Assyria is, listen to a commentary on this part. You know, Jerusalem is on a hill. It's kind of a mountainous area. And so a lot of the advancement in the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, and the Persian Empire, they mainly stayed close to the Mediterranean Sea. They basically refer to it as a coastal road. And so sometimes, especially during this time of world history, these nations that was in like modern-day Turkey and up where the top part of this map, they would advance to in this case, they would advance to the east towards Media, but then they wouldn't go straight south. They would kind of hug the coast, and of course, Egypt being as not well known as it was, they would want to conquer Egypt, and then they would kind of squeeze into the middle, and that's where Israel and Judah was. And so, if you read Isaiah, you're going to see it. You're going to read a lot about Egypt and so on, and the nations around Israel and Judah. And some people say it was a military tactic. They would basically take the flanks, get control of them, and then they would squeeze in to the middle, and that's where Israel and Judah were. So you've got Egypt now coming into play, and they're trying to basically build up their defenses because of the Assyrian Empire. that's kind of coming on during this time in history. So they basically make Eliakim, a brother, king, but basically he's controlled by Egypt. So then we have 2 Kings chapter 24. And that's when we see the name that we're all so familiar with. That's Nebuchadnezzar. That's when Nebuchadnezzar comes into play. So it says, in his days Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his vassal for 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. So I've always, and this is just me not paying very close attention to the wording of things. Nebuchadnezzar didn't come in and just take it over and move everybody. It was a process. And so for 3 years, Judah is under control. I mean, they still have a king, but they are under the control of Nebuchadnezzar. And so after these 3 years, this king then rebels against, kind of starts fighting back with Nebuchadnezzar. Of course, most of us know how that story ends. All right, so keep your fingers there, because then we need to go to 2 Chronicles. The one thing about 2 Chronicles is it goes into a little bit farther into the history of Israel than 2 Kings does. But in 2 Chronicles, chapter 36, 2 Chronicles 36, and like I said, we're going to come back to 2 Kings here in just a moment. But 2 Chronicles 36, we're going to read a continuation of this story here, okay? 2 Chronicles 36 and verse 9. It says, Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months and 10 days, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. Jehoiakim did evil, and he had to pay taxes. Now here's where it gets a little confusing, because Egypt, the Pharaoh, let me go back, make sure I'm writing my notes. Give me just a moment. It's here somewhere. Yes. Jehoiakim is the same person as Eliakim. That was a name change that was done. And so that makes it a little bit confusing. So now you have in 2 Chronicles a person, then you have Jehoiakim. That's the same person. He was basically, Egypt made him king, as we read about in 2 Kings chapter 23, but now all of a sudden Nebuchadnezzar comes onto the scene. And so since Nebuchadnezzar captures, yes?
I just have a reference there to 2 Kings 24, 8 through 17, and it says Jehoiakim was 18 years old instead of 8.
That's why it says 18.
It doesn't read.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
But
Yeah.
it was in 36, but it says 8, and I thought,
Mm-hmm.
what?
Yeah.
So, it's the same king, I'm sure.
Yeah. You,
Is yours?
let me.
They both say 18. 2 Kings 24:8 says Jehoiakim.
Yeah.
The names are spelled similarly, so it's hard.
Yeah.
18, and then also in 2 Chronicles, 36:9 it says he was 18.
In 36:9, I'll say that. This is out of a New King James Version. I've got a subtitle that says that it's the Hebrew lettering. It says is this. It says Syrian 18. The notes of 2 Chronicles 36 and 9. The notes say that he was 18.
Okay.
But I think it's the translation of the New King James is what makes that confusing. Whew. As you can, I'll show you my notes here on me trying to figure out these kings. This was my notes here trying to figure out, okay, how everything was. So, because it is a little confusing, and it's going to get a little more confusing as we go through this. All right, so again, the Assyrian Empire has already taken over Israel by this point. So now we've got the Babylonian Empire that is coming into play. So let us go back to 2 Kings chapter 24. And again, this kind of goes very quickly as we go through. So, and if you look at verse 12 in 2 Kings chapter 24, it will say this: Then Jehoiachin, king of Judah, his mother, his servants, his princes, and his officers went out to the king of Babylon, and the king of Babylon, in the 8th year of his reign, took him prisoner. So, again, Nebuchadnezzar has been in control for 8 years, and now he has taken the king and all of his associates. Now, is this the same time that Daniel went, or it seems like there's several times where they're going to bring people out of Judah, but this is just one of those times where we have kings of Israel, or well, in this case, kings of Judah, but they are under the control of either Egypt or now Nebuchadnezzar. So then we go to verse 17 of that same chapter. This is kind of how fast the kings turn over. It says, and forgive me if I mispronounce the names. Then the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, Jehoiachin's uncle, king in his place, and changed his name to Zedekiah. Okay? Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. He also did evil in the sight of the Lord, and so on. So you've got now another name change to Zedekiah. Yeah, it gets a little confusing, but here's the main point of what we need to look at, and this is in verse 25. Zedekiah will rebel again. He'll also rebel against Nebuchadnezzar. Jeremiah, the prophet, if you read Jeremiah, you're going to read a lot. You're going to read about Zedekiah. Jeremiah will prophesy during this same time. And so you'll see some of the references if you look at that. If you look at chapter 25 and verse 7, it will tell you that Zedekiah did evil in the sight of the Lord. It says, and so, if you look at verses 9 and 10 of chapter 25, this is what Nebuchadnezzar and his army, or at least, I don't know if he says in verse 8, and in the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He burned the house of the Lord and the king's house, all the houses of Jerusalem, that is, all the houses of the great, he burned with fire. And all the army of the Chaldeans who were with the captain of the guard broke down the walls of Jerusalem all around. All right? So that basically will end the nation of Judah. Temple is destroyed, the walls are torn down. Isaiah will prophesy that it'll be desolate. It'll be destroyed. So within that time frame, so you got to remember, it says that it was in the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar when that happened. So it wasn't that when the Babylonian Empire first conquered Jerusalem that they destroyed everything. There's times there. There's at least 18 years before they actually kind of lay waste to the city. And so technically, Zedekiah, well, if you look at that list that I gave at the beginning, he's basically the last king of Judah. All right? So then we will go into exile. You can look at these if you will. This is the Assyrian Empire. You can see how it kind of stretches from Egypt. It's very interesting. If you look right in the middle where it says Assyria, there's two rivers there, the Tigris and the Euphrates, still, even today, very, very important rivers in this part of the world. If you go, this is the Babylonian Empire. So what's interesting to me, I'm going to ask this question, see if you know this. The Assyrian Empire lasted hundreds of years. It was there for a long time. The Babylonian Empire, even though it's one of the main empires of the world, the Egyptian, the Israel, the Assyrian, the Babylonian, the Persian, the Greek, the Romans, and of course the Roman Empire lasted, oh my goodness, hundreds of years. Anybody know how long the Babylonian Empire kind of lasted? And it's due to a biblical prophecy. Anybody? Any guess? Let me ask you this question. Does anybody know how long the children of Israel were to be in exile before they would be allowed to come back?
40 years.
Not 40. 70. 70 years. That's about how long the Babylonian Empire lasted. About 70 years. After 70 years, you know, I mean, give or take a few, I'm sure, I mean, some people probably have the exact dates down. But after 70 years, when they get allowed to come back, it wasn't the descendants of Nebuchadnezzar that allowed the children of Israel to come back. Who was it? Anybody read ahead? It was Cyrus. Now, Cyrus was not Babylonian. Cyrus was Persian. And so the Persian Empire will be created, and that's when the children of Israel are able to come back. Now, they'll come back in 3 phases, and if you read Ezra before you read Nehemiah, some people actually put these 2 books together, because basically it's 2 stories of the return to Jerusalem. So you have the Persian Empire. So the Persian Empire will carry on while Nehemiah and Ezra and them are basically rebuilding Jerusalem. And if you look on this map, if you look at the far upper left, you're going to see a word called Macedon. Well, that would be what is now or what will become Macedonia. That's where you'll have Philip of Macedon. And Philip has a famous son named Alexander. And Alexander will basically start his conquest from up there and will go all the way to pretty much India, as you can see on the far bottom right. Of course, he'll go to Egypt as well. You know, I think it's one of the 8 wonders of the world, the Library of Alexandria, that's in Egypt. That's named after Alexander the Great. You know, that'll be down where the Nile River kind of empties out into the Mediterranean Sea. So during that Persian Empire and its reign, and here's a list of kings. Now, some you'll recognize. I looked this up and I cannot figure it out, but because it says Cyrus the Great, which we'll read about here in just a moment if time permits, in Nehemiah, but yet he's listed as Cyrus the II when it comes to the kings. Well, it's the kings in biblical times. So that's the reason why. There was a Cyrus, I guess, before this guy in world history. But this is the first one we kind of read about. So Cyrus the Great, you go on down, you see Darius. You'll read about Darius when you read Daniel. And then you'll also, here in just a minute, you'll read about Artaxerxes. That's kind of right in the middle there. If you read Esther, you'll read, I think it's Esther, you'll read some about Artaxerxes. So those are kind of the kings of Persia. So again, what we're studying in Nehemiah, the Persian Empire is still kind of rolling on. And of course, that'll last until, as you can see, about 330 BC, 330 years before Christ, you'll have Alexander the Great, and that'll be when the Greek dynasty will start. This is just a quick map. You probably can't see it. These are the 3 routes that there was Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel will come. He'll lead a group. He'll kind of be a governor. Now, we really won't see the term king of Judah anymore. We'll see governors basically sent or controlled by Persia. You'll have Zerubbabel. Ezra will come through, and then you'll have Nehemiah. And I'm not for sure how they know those are the routes, but anyway, that's kind of, they think that Ezra and Nehemiah kind of came through the desert, and and it was a more direct route. And we'll see Nehemiah has some special instructions. He's got a little bit of a clout as he's making his way back to Jerusalem. So that's kind of where we are. That's kind of how we get to Nehemiah. So between Kings and between Nehemiah, that's when we read about Daniel and all the things that he did and all those, the stories we have of Daniel in the lion's den. Judah was still kind of going on. Even though this kind of goes back to the very first scene. Oh, sorry. Daniel, even though Daniel's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. Well, Nebuchadnezzar has captured, 18 years of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Judah has still got a king there. But yet Daniel and all of his friends, they're over in Persia. Well, I'm sorry, in Babylon. Jumping ahead of myself. So all these things are kind of coming together all at one time. All right. So that kind of takes us through 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. So let's look at Ezra for a moment, right before we get into Nehemiah. So Ezra chapter 1, and again, some people put these two books together because they are very, very similar, but their mission was different. So Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. If someone would volunteer to read those verses. Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 through 4.
Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he sent a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever there is among you of all his people, may God be with you, and you go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. Every survivor, one in the place he may live, let the men of that place support him with silver and gold, with goods and cattle, together with a freewill offering for the house of God, which is in Jerusalem.
Okay. So this is Cyrus. Persia, if you read Daniel and you hear about there's a transition when you read the book of Daniel between the Babylonian, the writing on the wall, you've been weighed and measured and all that. Well, now we have Persia or the Medes and all that. So what is the mission of Ezra? What is he to do? What has he been given permission to do? Yeah, rebuild the house of the Lord, rebuild the temple. So that's his mission. And so they send this decree out, and Ezra will take a group of people. Their mission was to rebuild the house of the Lord. Now, another interesting thing happens in verse 7 of that same chapter, Ezra chapter 1 and verse 7. Anyone like to read that for us? Verse 7.
Moreover, King Cyrus brought out the articles belonging to the temple of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem, and had placed in the temple of his God.
So, what do they get back? Yeah, they get back all the treasures that Nebuchadnezzar had taken. It's almost like Cyrus was like, we're just going to, whatever happened 70-something years ago, we're just going to just start over, almost like start over again, or let's just pretend like that never happened, kind of thing. So he gives back the treasures of the temple. And Ezra takes his group back to Jerusalem, and that's their mission. Okay, that's Ezra's mission. Now, Zerubbabel, as you know, this is found in chapters 3 through 6 of Ezra. You'll read about Zerubbabel. There's other prophets, Haggai and Zechariah. They were prophets during this time, during Ezra's time through there. So a lot of references there. Nehemiah will come a little bit later, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. Now, Esther, you've got Esther in here. Some suggest that Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther cover about 100 years of history. Okay? About 100 years of history. That's according to D. Hoff's commentary. About 100 years of history. Malachi will prophesy during this time as well. So again, all those prophets that you read, again, they come in the order, in the Old Testament, they come after Nehemiah in the order of the Old Testament, but yet the timing of when they prophesy are the exact same time. And so sometimes our minds can play tricks on us about how they really are interwoven when you look at a study of the Old Testament and the Old Testament prophets. So let us look now at Nehemiah chapter 1. So we've kind of got all the framework done. Everybody, we've got from the kings of Israel, Nebuchadnezzar, the Assyrian Empire will come in and take out the northern kingdom, and we'll study that when we do Isaiah. Nebuchadnezzar will come in, he takes Judah. Of course, we read about how he takes the treasures of the temple. We've read that he destroys the temple, he destroys the wall. And again, Jeremiah prophesies for 70 years the children of Israel will be in exile. Well, now there's a changeover in the political government. We have the Persian Empire, and now Cyrus the Great has issued proclamations that if the Jews want to go back, they can go back. Zerubbabel will be your governor. And then there's a second group that is now, the mission is you can go back to Jerusalem in order to rebuild your temple. And that's Ezra. And then, just before, so where's Nehemiah at during all that? That's in chapter 1. All right, chapter 1, we read about this. It came to pass in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan. Now, Shushan, or Susa, S-U-S-A, it's over there on the far right side. It's that big dot that you see. It was pretty much I don't know if it's considered the capital of the Persian Empire, or if it was like I've heard someone say it's like a winter resort. Okay, so that's kind of where they are. Now Babylon, we don't read about it necessarily in biblical times, but the Tigris and Euphrates are very, very important rivers. According to world history, one of the 8th wonders of the world is known as the Gardens of Babylon. And it was, I guess they had made all these waterways because of the 2 rivers. And Babylon was supposed to be this grand, luxury, botanical place. But we really don't, there's not a lot of artifacts. There's some drawings of it. So that area was, what now is present-day Baghdad. That's where that was. Susa, I don't even know where that would be in a modern map. I guess it would be what would be Iran, or maybe Afghanistan. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to look that up for next week. But that's kind of where we are there. Okay, going back. We just got a few minutes left. Then Hananiah, one of my brethren, came with men from Judah. Okay, so this guy, and you need to remember his name. We'll read about him near the end of Nehemiah if you've not read this yet. He comes from Judah. So that means he's already went back. And now he's come back to Persia, to the Persian Empire. Okay, so he's one that went with either Zerubbabel or Ezra. Part of me thinks he went with Ezra. And so he's come back, and this is the conversation that Nehemiah has with him. I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. That was what he was worried about. And they said to me, the survivors who are left from the captivity in the province are there in great distress and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem is also broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. And so it was when I heard these words that I sat down and wept and mourned for many days. I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, I pray, Lord God of heaven, O great and awesome God, you who keep your covenant and mercy with those who love you and observe your commandments, please let your ear be attentive and your eyes open, that you may hear the prayer of your servants, which I pray before you now, day and night, for the children of Israel, your servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Both my father's house in the past and I have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, nor the ordinances which you commanded your servant Moses. That was hundreds of years before. But Nehemiah is expressing that's the lawgiver. And we've not done what you gave Moses the commands to do. Remember, I pray the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though some of you were cast out to the farthest point of heavens, yet I will gather them from there and bring them to the place which I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. Now these are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, I pray, please let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who desire to fear your name. And let your servant prosper this day, I pray, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. For I was the king's cupbearer. What's Nehemiah doing and saying in this prayer? This is our first introduction to Nehemiah. He talks to this guy who's come back from Jerusalem and has been told what's going on, and then this whole chapter is dedicated to him praying to God. So what do we know about Nehemiah? He acknowledges the fact that they have sinned. They've done wrong. What else?
Reiterates the promise made.
Yeah. There was a promise made by God in the beginning. That's true.
Well, God put a lot on him. You go out here and say, you got to build your temple and whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
It's so good that he has to live. More than running power.
Right?
So, you know, to me, that's a lot to do.
It's a big task. Yeah, it is.
But God's with him.
Very true. God is with you.
But, you know, he mercifully told these kings to shut up and leave him alone. You know?
Yes, we will get to that, and they will try to use they'll try to use the political side of things to try to stop the progress. Yes.
God always said there'd be a remnant left of his people.
Yes. And Nehemiah makes reference. Yeah, and Nehemiah makes reference to that. When we study Isaiah, we'll probably I'm sure someone has counted, but you'll hear the word remnant a lot when you study Nehemiah. I'm sorry, Isaiah.
How many times was Jerusalem destroyed?
Well, I guess, I mean, Nebuchadnezzar wiped it out pretty good. You know, that's where the exile happened. Really, the Romans will come in, you know, between these 400 years before Christ. Between Nehemiah and the birth of Christ, you'll have the Greek Empire will reign, and then the Roman Empire will reign. Rome will attack Jerusalem, you know, and basically it'll make it it's subordinate. That's why we have Roman soldiers and all that during the New Testament. But really, once AD 70 happens, it's pretty much gone from that point on.
Did Mohammed come through there and steal all the stuff? Of course, Rome thinks they took all Mohammed's stuff.
Once 70 happened, it was pretty much gone after that. I mean, there was the Muslims will build a mosque on top of where the temple used to be, but there was nothing there when they came through, and then of course in world history that's where the Crusades will come in after that. You know, there'll be a lot of battles over Jerusalem. But as far as destructions, we'll have the one here that was read about with Nebuchadnezzar, and then historically, we'll have the destruction in AD 70 that we oftentimes read about or talk about with Paul and that time frame. Anything else about Nehemiah?
Well, since he was the cupbearer to the king, which means he was close and could talk to the king.
Yes. It's an interesting, it's kind of like, okay, why is this sentence in the end of chapter 1? But you got to remember, this is not like, they didn't write in chapters and verses or anything like that. But he does make it a point of, he's praying to God, but yet his status is all based on the political regime at the time. But it's because of that political connection that we'll be able to get into chapter 2 next week when we talk about his mission and what he is told to do by the king of Persia. All right. That was the bell, so I've got to quit talking. If you think of any questions or anything you'd like me to research, you can feel free to email me or feel free to bring it up, and we'll try our best to answer those. But we will basically start Nehemiah chapter 2 and his mission next week. Thank y'all for y'all's comments and participation. Appreciate it very much.